Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Good to be in the house of the Lord today. Amen. We're looking at Parashat Naso, and this is a portion that is in the book of Bamidbar, book of Numbers. We're looking at a message today called Priestly Matters and Kohanim Concerns. Can you say that with me? Priestly Matters and Kohanim Concerns. We're looking from the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, chapter 4:21 through 7:89. We had a wonderful bat mitzvah today. Deborah did a great job reading the Torah portion. Beautiful. And then the Haftarah is Shoftim, Judges 13:2 through 25, and the book of Acts 21:17 through 26, both dealing with the Nazirite vow. So we want to say Brochim Havaim to all of our first-time guests, and in our online audience, let's welcome them today. Come on, let's give it up. And we're so grateful that you could make it today as we get right into some Jewish food for the soul. Get a little taste of Torah. You ready? Yes. Tree of Life version, Numbers 4:21. And it says, Again Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Take a census also of the sons of Gershon, by their ancestral households and by their families. Count all the males from what age? 30 to what age? 50 of age, everyone coming to work in the service of the tent of meeting. This is the tabernacle. This is the task of the Gershonites, of the Gershonite family, in working and carrying what? Burdens. How many know we're all supposed to be carrying each other's burdens, but this is the burdens of the tabernacle, or the daily duties that can be carried out throughout the tabernacle as they're establishing it and literally setting it up and tearing it down whenever they had to move to a new location. They are to carry the what? The curtains of the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, its covering, the outer covering of porpoise hides. Some believe that was made out of porpoise skin. And curtains for the entrance of the tent of meeting. The curtains surrounding the courtyard and the altar. The curtain for the entrance. Now, if you take a look at verse 25, and it says, They are to carry the curtains of the tabernacle, the tent of meeting, its covering, the outer covering of the porpoise hide, the curtains of the entrance of the tent of meeting. We'll repeat that verse again. The curtains surrounding the courtyard and the altar, a curtain for the entrance, the ropes and all the equipment used in its operations. They are to do all that needs to be done with these things. Verse 27 says, The sons of the Gershonites are to do all their tasks, whether carrying or doing other work, according to the word of Aaron and his sons. According to who? Aaron and his sons. You are to assign to them all that is their responsibility to carry. This is the duty of the families of the sons of the Gershonites regarding the tent of meeting. Their duty will be under the direction of Itamar, son of who? Aaron the Kohen. So this Kohen, or priest, Aaron is the high priest, but he is to give direction to the other Levites. Say direction. I mean, we all need direction. So one person was given the responsibility to give direction inside the tabernacle. Now that's interesting that you see that they're all under Aaron's direction, because Aaron was under whose direction? Moses. Oh, wait a minute. I heard Moses and I heard the Lord. Which is it? Who? The Lord. You're going to bypass Moses? You're going to say, Aaron's going to say, I don't need to listen to you, Moses. I'm going directly to the Lord. He's under the leadership of Moses, his younger brother of 3 years. So notice the submission that has to happen from the high priest to the prophet of God. Because Aaron did not deliver Israel from Egypt. On the contrary, Moses, his younger brother, was commissioned to do that. So you cannot bypass your leadership. I know we are living in a world where free will is so rampant in the wrong direction that we think we can do whatever we want, when we want, how we want. But you need to be under some kind of leadership and direction if you're going to make sure you're growing to the level of your capacity. Because the level of leader you sit under is the level of leader you become. And when you bypass your leadership, you lose direction because God is leading on the top of the mountain at Sinai through one leader, not two. Amen. Even Joshua, his attendant, could not usurp the authority of his leader and think, well, I went halfway up the mountain, so I'm just as important as you are. We know how Korach, that caused a problem with him, didn't it? He was from the same tribal distinction of Kohat, but he is not the one that God chose. So just because you're of the same class doesn't mean you're of the same calling.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. Absolutely.
Because guess what? I'm the rabbi here, but when I come to another man's synagogue, I am no longer the rabbi. I am under the authority of the rabbi of the house. I am under the authority of the pastor of that congregation. I'm under the authority of the minister of that ministry. I cannot usurp the authority of someone else. See, Moses was faithful in all of God's house. Didn't say Aaron. Said Moses, because God did not choose to put Aaron over the house, but a servant in the house. Right? And so Aaron had to submit to the leadership of his brother Moses, because that's just the order in which it was given. We have to just follow order, because God is a God of order. And anything out of order is out of balance. And anyone who is out of balance will eventually trip and fall, because when your equilibrium is off, you cannot walk directly straight when you're walking with an imbalance in your system. When all your functionality is not functioning the way it should, guess what happens? You begin to trip and fall, make mistakes that you normally wouldn't make. When a person starts tripping and falling all the time, we start questioning whether maybe they need to see the doctor. Maybe we need to schedule an appointment. We need to check their eyes. We need to check their blood sugar. We need to check their circulation. We need to check their joints. We need to check their muscles. We need to check something. Because you shouldn't be tripping and falling all the time. Occasionally, it's understandable. But when the ministry is off, there has to be something that we do to adjust and make it functional again. So God says the way you're going to do this is to make sure that everybody's under someone. Okay? So now, let's make sure we understand this concept by looking at something I share with you in your morning manna, 4 branches of ministry. I know we at least talked about a few of them, if not all of them. 4 branches of ministry. I'm going to relate the 4 branches of ministry to the 4 branches of leadership in Israel under the time of Moses and the tabernacle. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this. Number 1, you're going to notice that, number 1, there are spiritual needs, there are systems to be networked, there are structures to be developed and to be positioned, and there are strategies. So 4 things. Number 1 is what? Spirit. 2nd, systems. 3rd, structures. 4, strategies. Now, in other words, there was a division of the Levites that handled spiritual things. Spiritual things. And that was from a certain son of Levi, Kohat, or Kehat in Hebrew. And it's interesting that his name means assembly, because they handled a lot of the spiritual things within the assembly. And what specifically did they handle? The spiritual care and transport of holy vessels like the ark, the menorah, table of showbread, etc. So this was very important, that they handled the spiritual things, the things that contained a lot of spiritual value, and actually this presence of God rested upon the ark, and the Spirit of God used the bread on this table of showbread as the bread of His presence. So if the presence of the bread was there, we knew the presence of God's provision was there. Because when God's provision was on the table, we know it's because His presence is what's providing the provision. So we see that there are 4 things we've got to look at. The first is spiritual things, or the Spirit. And that means that in the Spirit, we empower people to live a life immersed in his presence. Think about that labor. I didn't put it on there, but think about the labor. The priests constantly had to immerse in living water to make sure that people's lives were immersed in the presence of God. So the priests would immerse first, so that the people could be spiritually immersed underneath this leadership. Because if they didn't place the ark in the right place, can you imagine if the ark of the covenant was put in the holy of holy place and the table of showbread was accidentally put in the holy of holies? What would happen to the spiritual atmosphere and dynamic of God's presence? If it's out of order, God's not resting in a house if it's out of order.
Amen.
Right.
So we've got to get things in order. In fact, that's what we've been trying to do when it comes to systems and strategies, right? We've been trying to get a lot of things in order. Now, one of the problems with getting things in order is sometimes you've got to do away with the old before you can actually have something new. And so we've been consulting people that are smarter than us to bring in the new. Like, let's give it up for the Lord. We have 2 brand new projectors. We used to have one with the bulb telling us it's going out, and then the other one would be strong, the other one would be weak, and it was 2 different kind of projectors. It didn't make any sense that we had 2 different projectors. Now we just got to get them all hooked up to work with a computer on the back where we have the soundboard. But we're getting there because we have 2 brand new projectors. Come on, give it up for the Lord. This is probably the strongest you've ever seen it. Now we had to go out with the old and with the new. Let me tell you what this problem is with bringing in new stuff. Well, what was wrong with the old one? It was working just fine until it didn't work.
Amen.
So the question is, why aren't we, if you're tithing and you're giving and you're making sure the needs of the house are being met by your financial contribution, why aren't we saying what needs to be fixed? Month after month, our elders are saying, okay, we don't want to spend all the money all at once, but we want to make sure the needs are being met. Do you remember when the Ner Tamid got installed? Do you remember when we had to remember the first time we were moved in here, we had to paint walls, and we had to recondition the Aron HaKodesh and the Bima, and we had to do a lot of things. And just recently, we got rid of all the excess wires that were just hanging around. I got maybe 1 or 2 left to work on. But other than that, we've been working on building a house for you to feel comfortable, that your family can feel comfortable. One of the things I want to make sure is that we're fully at capacity for handling kids. Because God won't send us the children until we are OSHA approved, until we are clean and concise and have a system and a strategy on how to not only just reach them, but teach them.
That's right.
Make sure they don't get hurt. So this is important. So Kahat was given the responsibility to handle all the very spiritual things in the tabernacle. Very important that we empower people to live a life immersed in the Spirit. Now, the second category we talked about is systems. Say systems. Systems. Now, with systems, we network procedures that leverage our greatest potentials. Meaning sometimes you have all the right stuff, but it's not working together.
Amen.
Even in your house, you ever notice that sometimes the very thing you need is tucked away in storage? And you go buy a new one. And you're thinking, wait a minute. I was cleaning out the closet or the garage. I found out I have actually 5 of these. I'll never forget when my mother-in-law actually found the little, you know that chopper? Remember the chopper?
Yes.
Well, it turns out, in some of her moments of memory loss, she bought like 29 of them over X amount of years. And that's when we started noticing there might be something going wrong where we have to take her to the doctor because she was buying new washing machine and dryers like every week and have to ship them back because they'd come to deliver and they'd say, wait, you have a brand new set right here. In fact, those are ours. You bought the same model. And she had forgot that she had ordered them. So my wife had to step in, and I'll never forget the day we were in Florida on a vacation for the Rabbis Conference right before it started. And my wife had to go in, and I won't say the piece of garment, but just say it's an undergarment. And she had like 150 of the same. And my wife was like, I don't even know what to do with all this. I mean, it took her days on a vacation, days, to go in the closet and just remove the excess. We need to start networking procedures and start leveraging our greatest potentials. Do you know we can be great? I said, do you know we can be great? As a Messianic synagogue, we can be great at what we do. We're not there yet. We do good work. Why settle for good when you can settle for great? Because our God says if you know your God, you will do great exploits. I want to do great things for God. I don't want to be known as the guy that just did okay or average or just good. And at times you were good, and at times you could have been better. I want to make sure that we're always striving for the goal, even if we never feel like we reach it. We're always striving for greatness because our God is great.
Amen.
Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised. How do you give God a great praise when it's half-mass? You can't praise God like this. Call it great. You got to lift those hands and say, you're a great God. Great is our God. Amen? Now, the third area, which actually, let me go back to the second for a minute. Who's the son? Watch this. Who's the son that was supposed to be the group of Levites that took care of the systems? Gershom. Which actually, in English, Gershom, but Gershom is actually for there, Sham, or Sham, and Ger means foreigner. So literally, it means a foreigner there. They would care for the transport of curtains, hangings, and ropes. In other words, all of the networking systems that actually created the space. All the curtains. If you didn't have certain curtains, you couldn't separate outer court from inner court. Holy place from holy of holies. So this procedure that had to be put up every single time they would move the tabernacle, it was very important. But imagine when you're only carrying the curtains and the hangings and the ropes, you can kind of feel like a foreigner, right? Why don't I get to carry the Ark of the Covenant? Why don't I get to be the one to go into the Holy of Holies? Why can't I wear the priestly breastplate? Why can't I do those things? You can kind of feel like a foreigner, but those systems are important. So sometimes you might not see the systems, but you see the structure, and you, wow, what a great structure. Don't you know there's systems that operate behind the scenes that you never see? You didn't see who put the curtains up, but somebody had to do it. In fact, can you imagine the person that had to wash the curtains? I mean, can you imagine just the process of what that would look like in a dusty desert? So now, we look at the third area, structures. Say structures. Structures are about developing future growth by positioning the right people in the right place. So, Merari is the name. It actually comes from Mara, bitter. And they would care and transport the structure of frames, crossbars, posts, pegs, sockets, and ropes. Once again, can you imagine what a bitter job that would be? A bitter job to have to carry, the frames and the crossbars and the posts and pegs and sockets and ropes. I have been a part of a setup team before, and it is not fun. It is a bitter job. But I love the fact that people that could be bitter choose to get better. Because we realize that this is part of the process of creating a tabernacle for the Lord, is that somebody's got to be willing to transport the structure. Somebody's got to be willing to put the structure together every single week, possibly, if God says it's time to move. And then the fourth one is probably the most glorious. Oh, let's go back to, we talked about Mary being bitter. Talk about the fourth one. This was Aaron. Now, Aaron is actually a descendant of Kahat, the first one we mentioned, which was in last week's portion. But the sons of Aaron are actually overseeing all the other three. So their job is strategies. They're not carrying the spiritual furniture like the ark or the table of showbread. They're directing where it goes. And how many know without a director, you can't have good production? You got to have a good director. The director was Aaron. He would clarify vision, mission, and core initiatives for growth and expansion. The only way Israel was going to grow is if Aaron was giving the strategy from the Lord, and his job was to give spiritual direction, teaching of the Torah, and he would make sure there were leaders for the worship. So all of the Levites that were over worship, they would actually be under the leadership of Aaron, that would basically be like the director of the whole spiritual worship experience. Now, one of the roles that we see that the priest is responsible for, speaking of Aaron, is found in Leviticus 10:10. It says, you, Aaron, are to make a distinction between the what? Holy and the common, Between the what? Between the unclean and the clean. And you are to what? Teach. Wait a minute. I usually think of Moses doing all the teaching. But actually, once you showed up at the tabernacle, it was Aaron that did the teaching. So Moses did a lot of public teaching. But those that came to the tabernacle got a little inner teaching. So their job was to teach and explain. For instance, when someone would come and say, well, why can't I just give a goat instead of the ram for this offering? Why can't I just give turtle doves instead of the lamb? Why do I have to do this and do that? The priest would clarify what animal was acceptable and what was not acceptable. For instance, they would also clarify what was clean and unclean. So if you brought a pig to be offered on the altar of God, right, the way that Antiochus Epiphanes did in the Hanukkah story, the priest is the one that said, no, this is not clean. You can't offer something unclean to God. If we use that principle, we would probably stop eating unclean foods. Because if God doesn't want it, we shouldn't want it either. You know, if you give God a spotted animal, the prophet said, would your governor accept something that was less than up to standard? So the job to teach is very important. We have to be willing to not only learn the Torah, but teach Torah. Because people around us don't know it. We have to be willing to teach it. And it's not what you say that matters, it's how you say it. For every audience, you got to know how to teach. You don't come in arrogantly, you come in with humility. So this is what I've learned, and I'm going to share it with you. In other words, Moses would have to come off the mountain and share what he learned from the Lord. Not that he created it, but that he's sharing it. He's communicating it. You have to be able to win over your audience if you're going to be a good author. You got to know who your audience is and speak accordingly or appropriately. Now, one of the number one jobs of the priest was found in our portion on Numbers 6:22. And again, Adonai spoke to Moses saying, it says, speak to Aaron and to who? His sons. Thus you are to do what? Bless Bnei Israel by saying to them, Adonai bless you and keep you. Adonai make his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. Adonai turn his face toward you and grant you shalom. In this way you are to place my name over Bnei Israel, right? The name Shaddai. And so I will bless them. So notice this intercessory form of prayer, that at the end of praying for Israel in the Holy of Holies, one of the greatest privileges the high priest would be able to do is to bless them and not curse them. To teach them so that they're not ignorant of the Word of God. And as long as they're walking in the Word of God, they will be blessed. If they're walking outside of the Word, they will be cursed. So therefore, my greatest job is not only to teach them, but then to bless them. In other words, it's like this. It's a joy of me to teach a student. It's also a greater joy to say, great job. Metsuyan. Tov me'od. Very good. Wonderful. Why? Because I'm blessing them. I'm encouraging them that you're right on the right path. When you obey God's word, you're blessed. And when you disobey God's word, there's a curse that comes. It's not that God's cursing you so much, but he drew a line in the sand and says, here's the blessing on this side, here's the curse on this side. You choose. We're cursing ourselves when we walk outside of the area he says is blessed. You got to make sure that you're under the covering where the blessing is. Because outside of that covering, there's no blessing. So it's not that God's cursing you. It's that you're removing yourself from under the blessing by moving to a land of disobedience. Now, if you look at Exodus chapter 19, verse 3, we see that not only they're to bless the house of Israel, but look what Moses was told when he received the covenant in Exodus 19:3. We just celebrated Shavuot this week. It was Tuesday night to Wednesday, into Wednesday unto Thursday day. 2 days of celebrating the Feast of Pentecost or Shavuot. And how many enjoyed our Wednesday service? Yeah. We had a great time with our 10 speakers on the 10 words and 10 commandments. But look what it says here. Exodus 19:3 says, Moses went up to God, and Adonai called to him from the mountain, saying, say to the whole house of who? Jacob, the whole house of Jacob, and tell Bnei Israel, the sons of Israel, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I carried you on eagle's wings, and I brought you to myself. Then, he says, now then, if you listen, notice this, if you listen, if you shema, if you listen closely to my voice and keep my covenant, then you will be my own treasure from among all people. Some versions will say you will be my special people or special treasure. Old King James says you'll be my peculiar people in the New Covenant quote of it. But this idea of a special treasure, it means that it's like a jewel that's been found in the rough, that's been cut to be like a diamond. So the words are Am Segulah. You will be an Am, a people that will be Segulah. You will be chosen like a diamond that's chosen for its brilliance. So when a jeweler looks at jewels, he knows there's a difference in value with those that are marred or those that have an imperfection versus those that are like perfect. So Israel was to be his perfect jewel, his prized possession. It's like the vault in the back where he keeps the special jewels. Like, this is my special treasure. I love them all, but this is my special one. It shines the best. It reveals my Torah the best. It shows the highs and lows, the ups and downs, the good, the bad, the ugly, the best. In Israel, you see all extremes. You see the lowest of lows, and you see the highest of highest achievements. Everything that a human could be, should be, or chooses to be. In other words, when you see Israel, you should see yourself. Because God wants to make you a jewel. Am Segulah. The next thing he says in verse 6, so as for you, you will be a kingdom of Kohanim. In Hebrew, Mamlechet Kohanim. Can you say Mamlechet? Try that again. That takes some chutzpah. Mamlechet Kohanim. You see the root letters, the Mem, the Lamed, and the Chaf Sofi, or Chaf, which would be Melech. Melech. This is Mamlechet, which means a kingdom of, in construct state. A kingdom of Mamlechet Kohanim, a kingdom of priests, and a holy nation. These are the words which you are to speak to Bnei Israel. So the number one thing that the priests do is not only in a sacrificial way, they make sure the direction of the temple, or in those days the tabernacle, and the sacrifices are done in order. They're to teach the people between what sacrifices are holy, which ones are unholy, clean and unclean. They're to be a teaching tool in the hand of God. But they're to bless the people in their obedience, to prayerfully pray God's favor come upon them, and to remind them who they are. That even though I'm the priest pronouncing you as a blessing, really you were originally supposed to be the priesthood. For the sin of the golden calf, which is not the proper thing to worship. God had never commanded that, but it was out of Egypt they did that. They lost this right to be that kingdom of priests the way they were supposed to be, and God had to select one tribe, Levi, to bring us Levites, therefore then bring Aaron forth as a descendant, and then have the Aharonic priesthood. So if we look at the prophet reading today, a little nash from the Navi, I just have one nash for you, and that's found in the book of Isaiah 61. You know the one that Yeshua quoted, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he's anointed me? We're going to look at that first, but I'm going to jump down to verse number 4, that says what the Messiah will establish. The Messiah is going to establish a priesthood. I said the Messiah is going to establish a priesthood. Amen. Because the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, he's anointed me, in verse 1, that's the Messiah, and Messiah quoted it in Luke 4:18. But the Messiah has to set up something. The Messiah is going to set up what we see in verse 4. And they, speaking of Israel, will rebuild ancient ruins. How many know Israel, Jerusalem, is built upon ruins that have been destroyed from previous generations? They will restore former desolations. They will repair the ruined cities, the desolations of many generations. Strangers, foreigners, will stand and shepherd your people, your flock. Children of foreigners will be your plowmen and your vine dressers. That means there's supposed to be Gentiles in Israel. You didn't catch that. And Gentiles that are willing to help rebuild.
Amen.
Goes on to say in verse number 6, but you, speaking of Israel, you will be called Kohanim of Adonai. Wait a minute. Isaiah, where do you get that from? Well, didn't you read the Torah? Moses said the original covenant on Sinai, the covenant was to proclaim that you will be a whole kingdom of Kohanim. So should it be strange for Isaiah to remind Israel in the midst of disobedience, don't you know who God called you to be? God called you to be a kingdom of priests, or a Kohanim for Adonai. The reason he can say this, he says this is going to be after exile, you're going to rebuild the ruined cities. And when you rebuild, then I'll have a priesthood again in the earth. Because remember, the temple was destroyed. And the ones that God had chosen to replace the kingdom of priests was the Levitical priests. And they could no longer minister as Levitical priests when there's no temple. So therefore, when the temple was restored, even under the days of Herod, when it was refurbished or enlarged, when Yeshua's day, we see that there had to be Levitical priests, but only if there was a temple. Because Israel was supposed to be the real priesthood. So God's not satisfied with just one tribe being a priesthood. He says all 12 were supposed to be a priesthood. This was just a concession for a bad situation. See, sometimes we settle for second best, which means that God has to go to his plan B, which is part of his plan A. But it's only for a season. Because God doesn't want to settle for plan B when he always had plan A in mind. So he's got to restore you from B to A.
Come on now.
It's called Teshuvah. So Israel, get back to your place. The prophet Isaiah is saying, you will be called, future tense, you will be called the Kohanim of Adonai. They will speak of you as the ministers of our God. Now this is the same root word for priests ministering in the tabernacle and later in the temple. It says you'll be called the ministers of our God. So priests are ministers of God, which means to carry the daily duties of the tabernacle or later the temple. So it says, you'll be ministers of our God. You will eat the wealth of nations or Gentiles and boast in their abundance. Meaning they're going to load you up like Sheba did for King Solomon. They're going to load you up with wealth and resources like they brought to the feet of Yeshua when he was born. So you're going to see that they're going to bring these resources. Why? To rebuild the temple. No, it's part of the revival of Israel. The only way to revive Israel nationally as a people is to revive its focus of worship, and that is the temple. That's right. You got to start with an altar. Start with an altar. What do you got to start with? Start with it. This picture here, this is not an artist rendering. These are actually selected priests that are ready to operate as a priesthood in Israel right now, if there was a temple. And if they had the freedom to worship. These are the actual men that are picked right now. They've already been gone through every process. That's a real picture. Current.
It's coming.
The only thing they don't have other than this backdrop, this is just a backdrop of the temple because they're getting ready to rebuild the temple just like that or greater. Yes, it is awesome. Why? It's a fulfillment of prophecy. It's really not about the temple itself, it's about the revival of the people, which are the temple. But if that's the process that God has to take us through, so be it. So how am I ready for the whole Megillah as I close this story out? You know, when you tell a story, you got to get to the whole Megillah. Get to the end of the story, right? And so we see that it takes us to the book of Messianic Jews, or Hebrews, chapter 13, verse 10. It says, we have an altar from which those serving in the what? Tabernacle have no right to eat. Now, how many know usually priests were allowed to eat from the offering? But he says, we actually have a different kind of altar that these priests of the tabernacle days, because there wasn't even a tabernacle when he wrote this, it was a temple. So he's actually talking about Moses. He says, the priests back in those days don't even have a right to eat on the stuff we're about to eat from. Because our altar is different. So he's actually not talking about a real altar here. He's using it as a metaphor. He says, we have an altar from which those serving the tabernacle have no right to eat. Because they were of a different dispensation. They don't even have this altar. Because the altar we have is Messiah. His death as a sacrifice. Watch. Verse 15, he proves it. He says, through Yeshua. Through who? Yeshua. Then let us continually offer to God a sacrifice of praise. You see, one of the things you need to know is many of the offerings were for praise. They weren't for sin. But if you offer a sacrifice of praise and you had sin that you hadn't repented of yet and publicly had a sin offering given, you couldn't offer the praise until you offered the sin offering. That's why David said, create in me a clean heart, O God, renew a right spirit within me. Because a broken and contrite spirit, that's the real sacrifice that God accepts. Then you'll accept my other bulls on the altar, which were for worship. Did you catch that? So once we have an altar for sin, then we can have an altar for worship. Once we deal with the sin issue, which is the barrier, then we can worship with our burnt offering and our consecration offering and our fellowship offering and our thanksgiving offering, because most of the offerings were for worship. They were for praise. But sin is the only thing that kept you from being able to praise God. Now watch this. It says, then let us continually offer up to God a sacrifice of praise, the fruit of our lips giving thanks to his name. It says, do not neglect doing good and sharing, for with such sacrifices, doing the mitzvah, showing hospitality, those are mitzvahs that are sacrifices to God. For with such sacrifices, God is well what? Please. So wait a minute. Every time you take care of the homeless, cover the naked, visit and take care of the widow, take care of the orphan, do a mitzvah for your neighbor as you love your neighbors yourself, you are like a priest ministering in the tabernacle or the temple, because you're doing temple or priestly duties every single day the way the priest did for Israel, you're doing for your neighbor. Right. That's what he's saying. Now that you're a priest, now that you're part of the royal priesthood, the original concept of being a royal priesthood or kingdom of priesthood that Israel was originally supposed to be before the Levites were ever elected. You're supposed to do good to your fellow neighbor. You're supposed to love them like you love yourself, because you love God with all your heart, soul, and strength. That was the focus. Watch this. He says to not neglect those things. Now, if you go to Romans chapter 12, verse 1, he shows you how you become not only the priest, but the very sacrifice you lay down. He says, I urge you therefore, brothers and sisters. I love that he didn't leave the sisters out. All the sisters say hallelujah. By the mercies or compassion of God, al-harakamim, right? The Father of compassion, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. So you don't just give a sacrifice of praise, you give a sacrifice of your life. You lay your life down. And that life that you lay down becomes the praise of aroma going out. Catch that? The only way to have a sacrifice of praise is to have a living sacrifice on the altar. Because we have an altar that has no comparison to theirs, but ours is in Yeshua. He says, holy, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service, are added of priestly worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. So as you're beginning to renew your mind and doing those things that unto God are considered good, are considered acceptable and perfect, he says you're like a perfect offering on the altar. That it's acceptable as a sweet-smelling aroma before God. Because the word used for spiritual service there in the Greek, latreo, actually refers to priestly worship or liturgy. It's actually where we get the word liturgy from. It's a Greek, from the Latin comes from the Greek, which is a translation of the priestly worship in the tabernacle that the priest would serve God in avodah. The avodah is service, to be a servant, but it means worship. That's what's happening here. You still with me? Yes. Wake up your neighbor, say, he's almost done. Now, let's go to Romans 15. Verse 15. He says, but I have written rather boldly to you on some points as a reminder. He's trying to remind us of a few things. Look what he says. Because of the grace given to me by you to be a servant of Messiah, to be a priestly minister of Messiah, to be a Levite of Messiah, to be of the house of Aaron, or the order of Melchizedek, to be a priestly servant of Messiah. Look what he says. To the Gentiles, my house shall be a house of prayer for all Gentiles. So the priests would have to minister to Gentiles just as much as they minister to Jews. Did you catch that? Isaiah 56. Look what he says. This version translates it in priestly service. So I am a servant of Messiah in priestly service. That must mean that the servant, like Aaron, was a priestly servant because he would give priestly service. Because the actual Greek there for serve is the same for the one in Romans 12:1. And 2, dealing with priestly worship in the tabernacle. Paul is using a metaphor. He's saying, don't you know you're a priest just like Aaron? Don't you know that you're a priest just like the sons of Aaron? Don't you know you're a priest just like Messiah became a priest? The high priest? In other words, if Messiah is high priest, that makes you his priesthood. Greater than that, it makes you a royal priesthood, because you're kings and priests unto God. A kingdom of priests. You follow me today? Look what it says. He says, in priestly service to the good news of God, so that the what? Offering up of the Gentiles might be pleasing, made holy by the Ruach. Wait a minute, go back for a minute. He says, when you offer yourself up to God and renew your mind, he says, it is good, acceptable, and perfect. It is holy and acceptable to God. So he goes, my service to God lays my life down as a sacrifice, and then I'm able to offer up my service to Gentiles, so that when I offer it up to Gentiles, they might also be pleasing and holy by the Ruach. Meaning, normally the Gentile offering would be despised by the Pharisees. But Yeshua said they should be received on God's altar, because Isaiah 56 says, a house of prayer for all nations. So, Paul is using this analogy of the temple. When he's a rabbi. He's a Pharisee. What else did you want him to use? He's using temple talk. He's doing a Torah talk about temple talk. And about temple service, that you and I as believers in Messiah are his temple servants. We're Levites, spiritually. We're priests of God. We're kings and priests. We're a Kohanim to Adonai. Are you getting this? Do you see what weight you carry? Do you see how much influence you have? Do you see the responsibility God has put on your shoulders? There's an ark resting on your shoulders today. I said there's an ark, the weight of his glory resting on your shoulders. The kavod Adonai, the glory of God rests upon you, that if you suffer, you will glorify with him, because there's a greater weight of glory for those who suffer for Messiah. Because we're servants, and if he's a suffering servant, we suffer too, for the gospel's sake. Amen? Amen. Oh, I think you're almost getting this, so I think I'll close it out. I'll close it out with 1 Peter, actually. I'll read 1 Peter first, then I'm going to read Revelation. 1 Peter 2:5 says this. You also, as living stones, like stones to build a temple, are built up as a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer what? Spiritual sacrifices. What kind? Acceptable. Spiritual sacrifices that are acceptable to God. We just read about it. If you lay your life down, it'll be acceptable. If you minister to Gentiles and those around you, it's acceptable. And he says here, spiritual sacrifices, which we already know, the fruit of our lips giving thanks to God, is a praise that is acceptable. He says to God through Messiah Yeshua. Verse 9 says, but you're a chosen people, Segula, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession. Literally, peculiar people, or prized possession. Again, that is another way of describing Am Segula, the chosen jewel. So that you may proclaim the praises, there it is, so that you may proclaim the praises of the one who called you out of darkness, which is Egypt, into his marvelous light, which is the promised land. Now, this is what's so powerful. Not only is Peter telling us that we're a priesthood, but John did the same thing. John chapter 1, the book of Revelation, Revelation chapter 1 by John the apostle. John to Messiah's 7 communities in Asia. Grace to you and shalom from him who is, who was, and is to come, as well as to the 7 spirits, or the 7-fold Spirit, who are before his throne. And from Messiah Yeshua, the faithful witness. Now, just to look at the 7 spirits, you know that's talking about the menorah. And the 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne. It's an imagery of the 7-fold ministry of the Holy Spirit. So already you're talking temple language. Right? He goes on to say, and from Messiah Yeshua, the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, and the ruler of the kings of the earth, to him who loves us and freed us from our sins by his blood, and made us a what? Kingdom of Kohanim. He's repeating what Peter said. He's repeating what Isaiah said. He's repeating what Moses told us. Because the voice of God through these prophets and these apostles were telling us we're a kingdom of Kohanim. To his God and Father. To him be glory and power forever. Now, turn on the back of your notes. Let me read one thing to you that's going to help you understand the next verse. Because I'm not done with Revelation. David assigned each of the 24 priestly clan to a weekly watch. In Hebrew is called mishmeret, which from shomer means to guard. They would literally guard in 24 courses. Kind of reminds me of 24 hours in a day. But 24 courses, they would go in shifts. And it says, during which its members were responsible for maintaining the schedule of offerings at the temple in Jerusalem, meaning their priestly duties. In accordance with 1 Chronicles 24, 3-5, where it says he put them into 24 courses, 24 orders. Prior to that time, the priestly courses numbered a mere 8. This newly instated a cycle of priestly courses or priestly divisions, which repeated itself roughly twice each year. The book of Revelation envisions the priestly believer in Messiah as his kingdom of priests, represented by 24 elders, like King David's 24 courses of priests. So watch this. Remember, the priests were a concession for a situation that Israel was told, you will be a kingdom of priests. The word kingdom refers to kings, and priest refers to the priesthood. Another way to say kings or kingly is to say royal. A royal priesthood is equivalent in our English translation to the words mamlechet kohanim, the kingdom of priests. So if we close out today with Revelation 5:8, look what it says. When he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures, these 4 cherubim angels with 4 faces, and the 24 what? Elders fell down before the Lamb, which is Yeshua, each holding a harp and a golden bowl full of incense. Which is funny, that's exactly what the priests, the Levites, did. They would have harps and they would have bowls of incense, which are the prayers of the Kedoshim, the holy ones, or translated saints. And they are singing a new song, saying, you are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals. You were slain, and by your blood you redeemed for God those from every tribe, not just Israel, every tribe and tongue and people and nation. You have made them for our God a kingdom and Kohanim, or priests, and they shall reign on the earth. I actually like King James reading, because in King James reading, the 24 elders say, you've made us. You've made us kingdom of priests. Because if you see the pattern, the only reason there's 24 elders, which according to the end of Revelation is the 12 apostles of the Lamb, along with the 12 sons of Jacob that became 12 tribes. 12 and 12 from old and new become 24, which is the Old and New Testament believers, which is all believers for all time, which is the priesthood according to David, divided into 24 orders, which means you would have 24 elders. Wow. The elders are representative of the congregation, so there's 24 elders or representative priests that represent the whole nation. That's what priests do, they represent the nation.
Right.
And if these 24 elders are in 24 courses, or 24 in number, it means that 24 is the number of the priesthood, according to King David in his son's temple. The temple always had 24 courses. So wouldn't you imagine the heavenly temple would have the same? Because God has looked at all of humanity from old to new and said, I see 24. 12 represented by the 12 tribes. And the only reason Yeshua picked 12 disciples is because of the 12 tribes. So 12 of the old, 12 of the new, 12 equals 24. How did I get that? The New Jerusalem is 12 and 12. That equals 24. Which is the priesthood. Because God sees a priesthood from the beginning to the end. This divine order of government in the number 12 is seen in a leadership of 12 leaders in the Old and 12 leaders in the New. And the beautiful thing about it is the 12 leaders in the New will lead the 12 leaders of the Old.
Interesting.
Because they are the only ones with the revelation of who Messiah is. So what should be 12 foundations of the 12 tribes become 12 apostles of the Lamb instead. Because the gospel is established with the apostles. And what should be 12 doors of the gospel opened up through the 12 apostles instead is the 12 tribes, because now a door was opened for the Jewish people to come back into their own foundation. The 12 pearly gates. So it's the reverse, because what did Yeshua teach? The last should be first, and the first shall be last. So the last movement to hit this earth is not for Gentiles to come to salvation. They've had 2,000 years of coming to salvation. It's time for us to preach a gospel that the Jewish people can understand, and that they can know that they are the original priesthood that Peter was talking about, and Isaiah was talking about, and Moses was talking about. And we Gentiles get a chance to be a part of it, or part of me, because part of me is Gentile, and part of me, the Jewish, says, yes, we finally get to come together as one. We don't have to be divided anymore. We're one in Messiah. We're a holy priesthood in the God of all nations, which is what God always wanted. Had Adam not lost his priesthood of being crowned with glory and honor, which means to be crowned as a king and a priest in the garden, he would have had nothing but a race of people on the earth that knew how to worship God without walls.
Hallelujah.
Knew how to pray to a God that was walking with you in the cool of the day. And know how to not read a Bible and hear his voice. Because it would have never been needed to be written, because it was always oral before it was ever written. It's only written because people forget. Let me close today. Did you get some out of this message today? Well, let's see if you did today. Let's see. Let's fill in 4 things. Number 1, we become Messiah's what? Royal priesthood. The way Messiah became our high priest. In other words, you were not a people, but now you're the people of God. You weren't supposed to be a priest, but now you've become a priest. Guess what? Yeshua should have been a high priest in the tabernacle of the temple either. He's not of the tribe of Levi. He's of the tribe of Judah. But because he's of the tribe of Judah, he's able to be our high priest through death and resurrection and laying down his life. He's qualified as a king priest. Not like Levi, but to the original one, Melchizedek. King priest.
Yes.
So he's a king priest. That means to be a king priest, you got to be from Judah first. Send Judah first, and the battle will be won. Send Judah first, and the foe is overcome. Praise to the Father, glory to the Son. Send Judah first. Isn't it interesting that Judah was the access to the temple? Judah is the one that guarded the temple, and the eastern gate. That eastern gate is for the temple entrance that Judah would protect. The tribe of Judah was the one that guarded the gate. Just like the lions guarded the kingdom. On a throne or in a kingdom, when you saw the lions, you knew the lion of the tribe of Judah in Israel was guarding the gate. Number 2, we offer the sacrifice of our praise the way the priesthood sacrificed in the outer court. Notice that. Praise in the outer court. We offer the sacrifice of praise on the altar, because we have an altar. We have an altar. We praise the Lord because Messiah, like a lamb, died. And he not only died, but he resurrected, like the aroma that resurrects to the Father after the death of the flesh. The spiritual aroma goes up. Because when the flesh dies, the spirit arises.
That's right.
Wow, that's good stuff. Number 3, we teach and embody God's word as the priest taught Torah and prepared the bread of his presence in the holy place. How many know when Yeshua taught Torah, it was the bread of life? The bread of his presence is the bread, 12 loaves, for Israel to know that they will always have the bread of his presence and provision. When you teach the Torah, you're teaching God's people. There's nothing that God has that he will not provide. There's nothing that you need that he will not give you. As long as there's the bread of his presence, as long as you stay in his presence, as long as you taste and see that the Lord is good, blessed is every man who puts his trust in him. You've tasted that heavenly bread in the holy place like a priest of the Most High God. There's nothing you will question. There's nothing you will doubt God for. You will know that God says, I'm your provider. He said it to Abraham, the Lord will provide for himself a lamb. Yeshua broke the bread. He was known in the breaking of bread. Because the bread of his presence is the bread of the word of God. It's eternal bread, the bread of life. So just like they prepare the bread, they prepare the message. Teaching the Torah. You see, Moses received the Torah, and the priest would prepare the Torah. Prepare it in bite-sized portions for people to receive as they came and brought their offerings. And then number 4, the last one. We prayerfully stand in the gap, the way the high priest interceded in the Holy of Holies and blessed Israel. Do you receive this message today? As our Chazan comes, let's bless Israel today. Let's bless the Jewish people. Let's bless the Gentiles coming to Torah and coming to Yeshua. Let's bless our congregation. Let's bless our community. Let's be a blessing. Let's keep praying. Let's keep praising. Let's keep preparing. Let's keep getting the bread ready. Let's get the enough challah that the hundreds of people will come to our doors. I'm waiting for a day that we've got to have more than 2 halalos. We've got to have multiple halalos. Why? Because the bread of his presence is coming hot out the oven. It's ready. We're preparing Torah for the nations. We're preparing Yeshua to be able to be seen by the nations. Taste and see that the Lord is good. When you see Messiah, when you see Yeshua for who he is, you'll be like him. I don't know about you, but I want more of Torah. I want more of Yeshua. I want more of that heavenly bread. I want the manna and I want the showbread. I want all of it. I don't want to be left out on any of God's blessings. I don't know about you, but I realize today I'm a priest unto my God. And I'm on duty all the time. I don't have a choice to say, well, I got to sleep, and if I get a call, I'm not going to ignore it the next day, because life or death might be in that call. I got to be on call all the time. Yes, I need my rest. But let me tell you, God is my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength. And you need to know, I'm not the only priest. You're also a priest of God. Tomorrow, the next day, the day after that, be looking for opportunities to do your priestly duties. Feed the hungry. Clothe the naked. Take care of the widow and the orphan. Reach out to your neighbor. Love the grocery store clerk. I used to be one. Love the person in the courtroom that's stressed out about their son going to jail. Receive the anointing of the mantle of God upon your life to begin to go into your job and look for the hurting and the broken people that need to be ministered to. Start seeing yourself as God's priest. Start seeing yourself as a Levite, carrying the burdens of others, carrying the ark of his presence. You are a priest unto God. And when this priesthood goes over your life, do not take it as a routine thing we do as a benediction at the end of service. Begin to allow the mantle of the Shekinah glory that just come upon you. Oh, I feel the Spirit of God. Even now, lift your hands in the presence of the presence of the Lord is here. And when Martin begins to declare this blessing that we saw in its portion today, it's going to be so good and rich like milk and honey to your spirit. You're going to savor this all day long. You're going to hear that harmony of Hebrew vibrating in your ears and your heart, just resounding that God is not only blessing you, but he's keeping you. He's shining his face upon you. He's lifting his countenance upon you. He is establishing peace for you. It doesn't matter what you see tomorrow, what you see today. There is peace being established for you. Like Joseph, you might be in the pit, in the prison, but you're getting ready for the palace. There is peace around the corner. There's peace in the valley, Elvis say. There's peace in the valley. There's peace in your situation. His mind is stayed upon him. You will have perfect peace today. Lift your hands.
Jesus.
Yivarecha Adonai Adonai panav elecha vichuneka Yisa השם לך. Shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance to you and establish.
Yeshua Meshachenu Ikubo Almay Machasenu Go Alenu Yeshua Meshachenu